Most people fear lies. But the truth? That's what truly haunts. Arthur Schopenhauer's views on women don't shock because they're hateful. They disturb because they're unfiltered, brutally honest. The kind of honesty that doesn't ask permission. And for nearly 200 years, his words haven't been remembered because they were kind. They've echoed because they strike something raw, something most of us avoid. Not what's fair, but what's real. While the world wraps itself in comforting illusions, equality, civility, romantic ideals, Schopenhauer sliced straight to the bone. He didn't write to be liked. He wrote what he saw. And what he saw shook him. If you're brave enough to see through his eyes, you might feel it too. Let's start with the core of his worldview. To Schopenhauer, life wasn't a miracle. It was a machine. A trap built by a blind, primal force he called the will. Not God, not logic, not morality, just hunger, impulse, a ruthless desire to continue, even when continuation means pain. And inside this relentless engine of survival, he saw women not as muses, but as nature's design. Functional, strategic, necessary, but not transcendent. They weren't here to chase truth. They were here to ensure continuation. To Schopenhauer, this wasn't cruelty. It was biology, stripped of sentiment. He wrote, "Women are by nature intended to obey. They belong to the second class." Today, that line would be social suicide. But Schopenhauer wasn't trolling. He wasn't bitter. He believed women weren't less because they lacked strength. They were different because their survival wasn't built on conquest. It was built on preservation. Men, he claimed, forged history through risk, war, and ambition. Women preserved humanity through intimacy, stability, and influence. Not better, not worse, just different. And that's what made people uncomfortable. Strip away love songs and sonnets, ignore the fairy tales. And what are relationships really built on? Often, not love, but exchange. Not soul, but strategy. According to Schopenhauer, femininity wasn't angelic, it was tactical. Refined by evolution. Not to deceive maliciously, but to survive instinctively. He argued women aren't manipulative by choice, they're adaptive by nature. Because in a world ruled by male physical power, subtlety becomes survival. He wrote, "Nature has armed woman more than man for the ensnaring of man's heart. She possesses the art of dissimulation, of flattery, of graceful lying. In a word, hypocrisy. Cruel words. But what if they weren't judgments? What if they were observations? Not of evil, but of an evolutionary dance. In a world of brutal competition, women learn to win not by confrontation, but by influence. And influence doesn't wear armor. It wears a smile. Power doesn't always come with a sword. Sometimes it comes draped in softness, in charm, in emotion, in illusion. To Schopenhauer, most men aren't in love. They're enchanted. They fall, not for women, but for the idea of them. They don't see her. They see what they want her to be. And that illusion? Nature's finest trick. Marriage, a beautiful cage. Romance, a biological scam. Loyalty, a fairy tale, constantly sold, rarely honored. Instinct, not integrity, rules this game. To Schopenhauer, men are slaves. They're chains, desire. They're captors, women. Not by malice, but by design. And that's the part people can't stomach. That nature doesn't care about justice. It doesn't care about your values, your poems, or your prayers. It cares about one thing: survival. And if it must lie to continue, it will. He saw women not as villains, but as weapons of that survival. innocent in face, devastating in effect. Because a man in love is no longer a man. He's a servant. He trades clarity for craving, strength for softness, focus for validation. And for what? A fleeting touch? A whisper of belonging? A brief spark to light the endless night of evolution? Schopenhauer would have smiled, not out of hatred, but pity. Pity for the man who believed he was the hunter, when in truth, he was the prey. He believed women were nature's bait. Not evil, efficient. Not cruel, effective. And worst of all, it worked. Flawlessly. Now let's be honest, it does feel bitter. It does sound cold. Like the rantings of a man who's never been held with love. And maybe that's exactly what it is. But Schopenhauer never promised balance. He wasn't writing to comfort the heart. He was dragging light into the places no one wanted to look. He exposed what we dress up in poetry and perfume, that behind love is biology. Behind affection is instinct. Behind the angelic face is a strategy. And to him, that wasn't cynical. It was evolution. Perfect. Inevitable. Brutal. So why does it still matter? Because the illusion is alive. In love songs, in dating apps, in filtered selfies and perfectly scripted texts. Men still trade their dreams for dopamine. They still fall for the fantasy, not the person. Just like Schopenhauer warned, they're not being manipulated by wicked women. They're being played by their own blindness. And that's where it gets tragic. Not in what she does, but in what he refuses to see. He mistakes attention for affection. He confuses flattery for connection. He trades time, money, loyalty for someone who may not even see him as a human, but as an opportunity. And no, this isn't about every woman. This isn't hate. This is awareness. Because Schopenhauer wasn't condemning women. He was warning men that their downfall wouldn't come from cruelty, but from illusion. The illusion that she truly cares, that his devotion will be repaid, that her loyalty is permanent, that love, as he imagines it, actually exists. Real love, they call it. But Schopenhauer would smirk. Is it? Or is it just biology in drag, dressed up to look like something noble? In his essay on women, he didn't mince words. He said the fundamental flaw in the female character was a lack of justice. Sounds cruel, right? But look closer. He wasn't calling women immoral. He was calling them pragmatic. To him, women didn't operate on abstract ideas like fairness or honor. They operated on utility, security, emotional immediacy. Not because they were evil, because they were wired for survival. And men? They kept falling for the illusion, projecting ideals onto a nature that never promised to be fair. Take a modern cliché. The guy who spends years chasing her. Gifts, kindness, endless availability. He listens, he bends, he waits, and in the end, she chooses someone else, someone colder, more distant, less available. He's heartbroken, confused, angry. He screams, "Nice guys finish last." But Schopenhauer would say, you weren't nice, you were easy. Predictable, obedient, emotionally cheap. And nature punishes that. Because in attraction, power doesn't come from being available. It comes from being valuable, scarce, uncertain. The second she knows she has you, she wonders if you were ever worth having. Schopenhauer saw it before psychology gave it a name. What men call love is often dependency in disguise, a need to be seen, a craving to be chosen, a desperate hunger to be enough, because deep down they aren't even enough for themselves. And women? They feel it. They're biologically tuned to sense weakness, even if it's dressed in devotion. They're not drawn to submission. They're drawn to strength, stability, self-possession, not because they're cruel, because they're built to respond to power. And that's the part no one wants to hear. Schopenhauer didn't call it manipulation. He called it instinct. Women choose based on what nature rewards: resources, confidence, detachment. The man who knows himself, who doesn't beg, who doesn't need love, but inspires it, he wins. That's why most men lose. They give too much, too soon, expect too much, too fast, and mistake their self-sacrifice for virtue. But nature doesn't reward virtue. It rewards strategy. Schopenhauer even said, "Only a man clouded by lust could call women the fair sex." He called them short-legged, broad-hipped, narrow-shouldered. Was it cruel? Or was it just him stripping off the fantasy? Because in his eyes, men didn't fall for women. They fell for the idea of them. They saw angels, gods, divine innocence, when in truth, they were just projecting the love they never received onto someone who never promised to give it. Men weren't in love with her. They were in love with being loved back. And that illusion, it's still alive today. Men are still falling apart, sacrificing purpose for attention, tolerating disrespect in exchange for warmth, trading strength for approval. And when it collapses, when she walks away, grows cold, or replaces him, they call her heartless. But Schopenhauer would whisper, "She's not heartless. You were never seen as valuable." Because the man who gives everything loses everything. He trades respect for attention, clarity for chaos, depth for a dopamine hit. And worst of all, he calls that love. But real love, if it even exists, must come from strength, not survival. And that's the wound Schopenhauer tried to expose. This isn't a guide to love. It's not dating advice. It's a bitter gift. A warning shot for every man still asleep. Schopenhauer wasn't handing out blueprints. He was handing out reality checks. Women aren't your salvation. Attraction isn't guaranteed. Romance is not a contract. It's a game. A game of instinct, of projection, of power. And if you don't master yourself, you'll keep handing over your power to anyone who shows you affection. But what happens when a man finally wakes up? When he stops begging love to heal what he won't face in himself? That's where the story really begins. Schopenhauer's philosophy on women wasn't disturbing because it was cruel. It was disturbing because it was true. Not about women, about men. He didn't ask men to blame. He asked them to look in the mirror, to question their desires, to question the lies they were fed, to question everything they believed would bring them peace. Most men were sold a fairy tale. Be a provider. You'll be loved. Be kind. You'll earn loyalty. Sacrifice everything, and you'll finally be chosen. But after giving it all, they're left confused, exhausted, alone. Why? Because they were never told the truth. Schopenhauer screamed it between the lines. You are not valued for what you give. You are valued for what you withhold. The second you become emotionally dependent, you lose the very thing that makes you attractive: self-possession. And no, this isn't about manipulation. It's not about pickup or tactics or cynicism. It's about the truth. The kind most men spend their lives avoiding. The kind that breaks illusions so you can finally breathe. Because the greatest lie ever told to men is that their worth is measured by how much they please others. Schopenhauer didn't hate women. He just understood men. and how deeply they destroy themselves for the fantasy of being loved. That's why his philosophy stings, because it's not about her, it's about you. And the longer you deny that, the more you chase approval, the more disconnected you become from the only thing that can save you, your own mind. He believed this, until a man breaks the spell, until he sees love, sex, affection not as salvation but as tests, he will never be free. He wrote, "To marry is to have one's rights and double one's duties." And he meant it. He saw how men are trained to give endlessly: time, energy, resources, loyalty, often with no equal return. Not out of cruelty, but because they're told that's what good men do. They're taught to be responsible for a woman's happiness, to feel incomplete without her approval, to define success not through peace, but through partnership. Schopenhauer rejected it all, because to him, no lie is worth more than your freedom. No affection is worth your soul. But reaching that clarity, that takes something few men ever develop: emotional independence. Not detachment, not coldness, but the kind of calm that says, I will not chase what weakens me. I will not confuse attention with value. I will not lose myself just to be chosen. Because a man who needs to be chosen is already a man who's been lost. Schopenhauer would rather you be alone, truly alone, than in a relationship where you are disposable. But that's where most men are now. Not free, not loved, just exhausted, confused, and replaceable. They do everything right. They show up, they give, they try, and they watch as the woman chooses the man who doesn't care, and they ask, why? And Schopenhauer would answer, because you became easy, because your love became obligation, because you gave everything and left her nothing to earn. You never understood the simple truth. What's always available is rarely respected. Let that burn. Because here's the real secret. Respect doesn't come from how much you give. It comes from how little you need. Power isn't loud. It's not desperate. It's not in chasing or convincing. It's in the quiet confidence of a man who is whole, with or without her. That's the paradox. That's what pulls women in, what unnerves society, what Schopenhauer wanted you to see. When a man doesn't need to be loved, he becomes dangerous. Not because he hurts people, but because no one can use him anymore. He stops begging for love from people who don't even love themselves. He stops performing. He stops chasing ghosts, and in the stillness that follows, something rare emerges: sovereignty, the ability to stand alone without fear, to say no without guilt, to walk away without explaining yourself, to let go, even when your heart's still bleeding. Schopenhauer didn't offer hope. He offered something better: freedom. Not freedom to control others, but the freedom to never be controlled again. And when you stop looking for approval, when you stop surrendering your identity to be accepted, something shifts. You stop fearing rejection. You stop fearing being misunderstood. You stop letting your emotions be someone else's weapon, because you've stopped searching out there and started building in here, inside your mind, inside your values, inside the version of you that doesn't need to be seen to exist. That's what Schopenhauer was really teaching. The pain you feel isn't from women. It's from the unexamined hunger to be loved. Heal that, and the game ends. You stop playing. You move in silence. You expect nothing, not because you're bitter, but because you're finally awake. You see it now, don't you? Most people don't want love. They want distraction. They want comfort. They want escape. But you're done escaping. Because this is the end of illusion and the beginning of truth.